Throw this trash out into the snow immediately, including that mute, useless thing. Carter Sterling roared, his polished Italian leather shoe crashing into the only bottle of medicine my son had left. The glass shattered against the marble floor. The sound was not loud, but to my ears, it sounded like a gunshot. The clear liquid, worth $5,000 a dose, seeped into the grout lines of the foyer. Wasted. I stared at the puddle. That was Leo's life support. Without it, the seizures would start in less than 2 hours. Outside, the New York blizzard was howling, burying the city under 2 feet of ice. But the cold inside this penthouse was far more deadly. Carter did not look at me. He was busy wiping a microscopic speck of dust from his tuxedo lapel. To him, I was not his wife of 5 years. I was a stain on his perfect existence. I was a liability that needed to be liquidated before the quarterly report. Did you hear me? Carter stepped closer, his cologne overpowering the scent of the spilled medicine. The security team is on their way up. You can walk out. Or you can be dragged out like the garbage you are. Choose. I clenched my fists at my sides, digging my nails into my palms until I felt the sharp bite of pain. I could not leave yet. Not now. The safe in the study contained a black USB drive. To Carter, it was just a piece of plastic. To me, it was the only leverage I had left. It contained the source code for the Chimera algorithm, a project I had secretly built during the long nights while watching over Leo. Selling that code on the black market would generate enough money to buy Leo's medicine for 10 years. I lowered my head, playing the role he expected, the submissive, terrified housewife. Carter, please. My voice trembled. Not entirely from acting. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The storm is too strong. Leo is burning up with a fever. Just let us stay in the guest room for one night. I will sign whatever you want in the morning. Tonight. Carter checked his limited edition Patek Philippe watch. Sasha is moving in at 8 o'clock. She has a sensitive nose. She cannot stand the smell of poverty and sickness. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. It was not the security team. It was Sasha Reed. She walked in as if she already owned the deed to the property, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She was wearing a white fur coat that probably cost more than my father's entire lifetime earnings. Sasha stopped in front of me, looking me up and down with a mixture of amusement and disgust. She did not speak to me directly. Instead, she turned to Carter. Honey, why is the help still here? I thought you said the apartment would be sanitized by the time I arrived. We are just finishing up the disposal process, Carter said, his voice instantly softening into a caress as he looked at her. Sasha walked over to the console table where I had placed my old, battered laptop. It was a heavy, outdated machine. The only thing Carter had allowed me to keep because he thought it was worthless garbage. He did not know that inside that clunky casing was a processor capable of cracking the Pentagon's firewall. Is this yours? Sasha poked the laptop with a manicured finger. Don't touch that, I said, my voice hardening for a fraction of a second. Sasha raised an eyebrow. She picked up a vase of fresh water standing nearby. Oh, you seem thirsty. Let me help you with that. She tilted the vase. The water poured directly onto the keyboard of my laptop. I lunged forward, but it was too late. The screen flickered. A sharp hiss of short-circuiting electronics filled the silence. The smell of burnt plastic rose in the air. My lifeline. My connection to the outside world. The encrypted tunnel I used to communicate with the dark web. Gone. Oops! Sasha dropped the empty vase onto the carpet. It didn't break, but the thud was heavy. My hand slipped. But really, you should thank me. That thing was an eyesore. It didn't match the aesthetics of a billionaire's home. Carter laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. Don't worry, Sasha. She can use her alimony to buy a new one. Oh wait, I forgot. There is no alimony. The logic in my head shifted gears. The shackle was broken. I had stayed to get the USB from the safe, but now I realized the futility of it. The hardware was destroyed, but they forgot one thing. I was not just the user of the code, I was the architect. The code was in my head, every line, every variable. I looked at the ruined laptop, then at Leo, who was curled up on the sofa, shivering under a thin blanket. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. He needed a hospital, not a USB drive. Staying here to fight for a piece of plastic would cost my son his life. Fine, I said. The trembling in my voice vanished. I stood up straight, brushing a lock of hair from my face. Carter narrowed his eyes, sensing the change but too arrogant to understand it. He pulled a document from his inner pocket and threw it onto the wet floor. Sign it. The divorce agreement. You get nothing. No custody, no money. But I am a generous man. I will pay for a one-way bus ticket to wherever you came from. I knelt down. Not to beg, but to pick up the pen. The paper was damp from the spilled water. I signed my name. Elena Vance. The strokes were sharp, aggressive, cutting through the paper. You are making a mistake, Carter, I said softly, standing up. The only mistake I made was marrying a gold digger who couldn't even produce a healthy heir. Carter sneered. Get out. If I see you near this building again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I walked over to the sofa and scooped Leo up into my arms. He was 5 years old but light as a feather. Malnutrition and sickness had eaten him away. He opened his eyes. They were gray, intelligent, and far too old for a child his age. He looked at Carter over my shoulder. He did not cry. He raised one small hand and made a gesture. A wave. No. He was tapping his fingers against my shoulder in a rhythm. Morse code. E, N, D. Smart boy, I whispered to him. We walked toward the door. The elevator opened again, revealing 2 large security guards. They looked uncomfortable. They knew me. I had made them coffee on their night shifts. Mrs. Sterling, One of them started. It is Miss Vance. I corrected him. And don't worry. We are leaving. The wind hit us the moment we stepped out of the lobby doors. It was a physical blow. A wall of ice and white noise. The temperature was -10 degrees. I wrapped my coat tighter around Leo, shielding his face from the biting wind. The doorman looked away, ashamed, unable to help because Carter was watching from the security cameras. We walked 2 blocks. My feet were numb. Leo's breathing was getting raspy. The urgency was clawing at my throat. I needed shelter. I needed a computer. I ducked into a small, grimy ATM vestibule to escape the wind. It smelled of stale urine and old cigarettes. But it was out of the storm. I sat down on the floor, holding Leo close to share body heat. Mama, Leo whispered. It was the first sound he had made in days. He reached into his coat pocket. My heart stopped. I thought he was reaching for a toy. Instead, he pulled out a small, black object. The USB drive? I stared at him. Leo how? He tapped his temple with a finger. He had taken it. He must have swiped it from Carter's desk days ago when I wasn't looking. My son. My silent, brilliant son. I let out a laugh that sounded half like a sob. We had the weapon. Now we just needed a way to fire it. I reached into the lining of my boot and pulled out a burner phone. It was an ancient Nokia. Battery life at 12%. I had kept it hidden for emergencies. I didn't need a smartphone. I just needed a connection. I pried the back off the phone. inserted a micro SIM card I had taped to the back of the battery, and powered it up. I typed a single text message to a number that did not exist in any public directory. The architect is online. Location corner of 5th and Main. Status critical. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The cold was seeping into my bones. Leo's forehead was burning hot against my neck. Just a little longer, baby, I whispered. Just hold on. Suddenly, the streetlights outside flickered, the digital advertisement board across the street glitching out, turning from a Coca-Cola ad to a black screen with a single green blinking cursor. The hum of the city seemed to change pitch. A pair of headlights cut through the blizzard. Not a taxi, not a police car. A phantom. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, black as midnight, gliding silently over the snow-covered street. It stopped right in front of the ATM vestibule. The rear door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than the apartment building I grew up in. He held a large black umbrella, shielding the space between the car and me. Julian Thorne, the Wolf of Wall Street, the man Carter Sterling feared most, and the only person who knew who I really was. He walked into the filthy vestibule, his polished shoes ignoring the grime. He looked at me, then at Leo. His expression was unreadable, cold as the ice outside, until his eyes met mine. I received the signal, Julian said. His voice was deep, steady, a sound that anchored me to the earth. I assumed you had finally decided to burn the world down. Not the world, I said, struggling to stand up with Leo in my arms. My legs were stiff from the cold. Just one company. Julian stepped forward and took Leo from my arms effortlessly, tucking the boy under his coat against his chest. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer pity. He simply acted. The heater in the car is set to 75 degrees, Julian said. There is a medical team waiting at my penthouse, pediatric specialists. I followed him to the car, as I slid into the leather back seat. The warmth enveloped me instantly. It smelled of cedarwood and safety. Julian closed the door and sat opposite me. He tapped the partition glass. The driver pulled away, merging seamlessly into the storm. Carter thinks I am a deadbeat, I said, looking out the window at the towering silhouette of the Sterling Corp building disappearing in the snow. He thinks he threw away a liability. Julian opened a small compartment and poured a glass of amber liquid. He handed it to me. No ice. Carter Sterling is a man who would use a diamond to hammer a nail and then complain that the rock is too hard, Julian said. He took a tablet out of his briefcase and placed it on the tray table between us. The screen showed a live feed of the Sterling Corp server status. All green. All functioning. My team has been trying to bypass their firewall for 6 months, Julian said. We failed. I took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, waking up my frozen nerves. I reached into Leo's pocket, took out the black USB drive, and placed it on the table. You were attacking the wall, I said. I built the foundation. I plugged the USB into Julian's tablet. Execute Protocol 0, I commanded. Julian didn't hesitate. He pressed the enter key. On the screen, the green lights turned red, one by one. Then, they cascaded. A waterfall of system failures. At that exact moment, miles away in the penthouse I had just left, the lights would be going out, the smart locks would be freezing, and Carter Sterling's bank accounts would be turning into digital dust. Welcome back, Elena, Julian said, raising his own glass. I looked at Leo, sleeping peacefully in the warmth, his breathing already steadying. Elena is dead, I said, watching the red lights consume the screen. Call me the architect. The cork of the Dom Perignon bottle popped with a festive hiss, echoing through the expansive living room of the Sterling penthouse. Sasha squealed with delight. the sound grating against the expensive acoustics of the room. She poured the golden liquid into two crystal flutes, the bubbles rising aggressively to the rim. To us, Sasha cooed, handing a glass to Carter. And to a fresh start, without the baggage. Carter Sterling took the glass, his other hand sliding into his pocket to check his phone. He expected congratulatory messages from the board members about the upcoming merger. He expected praise. Instead, the device vibrated violently against his palm. It was not a single notification. It was a continuous, unbroken spasm of alerts. He frowned, unlocking the screen. The smile on his face curdled instantly. Red. Everything was red. His stock portfolio app was open. The Sterling Corp ticker symbol was flashing, plummeting vertically like a stone dropped from a cliff. Down 5%, down 10%, down 15%, in the span of 30 seconds. His net worth had bled out by $40 million. "What is this?" Carter muttered, tapping the screen furiously. The app froze. The phone screen flickered, then went black. Suddenly, the ambient music system in the penthouse cut out. The warm golden lighting that illuminated Sasha's fur coat died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The electronic hum of the refrigerator, the climate control, the security panel, everything silenced at once. "Carter." Sasha's voice was shrill in the dark. "Why did the power go out? I thought this building had a backup generator." "It does," Carter snapped. He fumbled in the dark, trying to find his way to the landline on the desk. "This isn't a power outage. This is a system failure." He picked up the receiver of the secure line that connected directly to headquarters. There was no dial tone, just a hollow, mocking silence. Miles away, the interior of Julian Thorne's Rolls-Royce was a sanctuary of calm. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, a streak of white and yellow against the storm. I watched Leo sleeping on the leather seat next to me. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm for the first time in weeks. The heated seat warmed his small, fragile body. The car slowed down, turning into a private underground entrance that looked more like a bank vault than a garage. The steel gates recognized the car's license plate and rolled open silently. We descended into the depths of the building, leaving the blizzard far above us. When the car stopped, the door was opened by a man in a white coat. Behind him stood two nurses with a gurney. "Mr. Thorne alerted us," the doctor said, his voice professional and urgent. "We have the medication prepared, neurostabilizers and broad-spectrum antibiotics." I hesitated for a split second, my protective instincts flaring. I was used to fighting for every scrap of medical care, used to being turned away by receptionists who looked at my declined credit card with pity. Julian placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a light touch, but it grounded me. "They work for me," Julian said. "Leo is the priority. Let them do their job." I nodded, stepping back. The medical team moved with military precision. They gently lifted Leo onto the gurney. One of the nurses immediately started an IV line. I watched the clear liquid drip into the tube. That medicine cost more than the apartment Carter had kicked us out of. Here, it was administered without a single form being signed. "Go with them," Julian told me. "The guest suite is next to the medical bay. I have business to attend to in the command center." I followed the gurney into a private elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Julian turn toward a different hallway. He loosened his tie, his face shifting from the benevolent savior to the ruthless predator. The wolf was getting ready to hunt. Carter Sterling stood in the middle of his office at Sterling Corp headquarters an hour later. He had driven there like a maniac, running 3 red lights because his driver was stuck in the electronic gates of his own home. The office was chaos. The emergency lights cast eerie, long shadows across the floor. Dozens of IT technicians were running around like headless chickens. The main server room was locked down, the biometric scanners refusing to recognize anyone's fingerprints. "Talk to me," Carter barked, slamming his fist onto the reception desk. "Why are our servers offline? Why is the trading algorithm selling off our assets at 1 cent per share?" The chief technology officer, a man named Henderson who usually looked arrogant, was now sweating profusely. His tie was crooked, and he was holding a tablet with trembling hands. "It is a targeted attack, Mr. Sterling," Henderson stammered. "We are calling it a zero-day exploit. It bypassed every firewall we have. It didn't just breach the system. It took administrative control." "Who is doing it?" Carter demanded. "The Russians? The Chinese? Corporate rivals?" "We don't know," Henderson admitted. "The source is masked behind a dozen layers of encryption, but we found a signature." Henderson turned the tablet around. On the black screen, amidst the scrolling lines of corrupted code, a single message repeated itself in bright green text. "System override authorized by admin Leo 01. Leo. Carter read the name. He frowned. Who the hell is Leo? The name felt familiar, a ghost scratching at the back of his mind. But he dismissed it instantly. His son was a mute, brain-damaged child who couldn't even tie his own shoelaces. It was impossible. This had to be a coincidence. A hacker using a common alias. "Fix it," Carter growled. "I don't care what it costs. Override the override. Cut the hard lines if you have to." "We tried," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The virus is embedded in the hardware kernel if we cut the power. The data wipes itself. We lose everything. Client records, financial history, the blueprints for next year's prototypes. We are being held hostage." "Sir." Carter stared at the screen. The text blinked mockingly. Leo 01. I stood under the shower head, letting the hot water wash away the grime of the last few days. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash off the feeling of Carter's hand gripping my arm. The memory of Sasha's laughter. When I stepped out, wrapped in a plush Egyptian cotton towel, I found a set of clothes laid out on the vanity, a silk blouse in deep emerald green, tailored black trousers, a pair of heels that looked like weapons. There was a note on top of the pile. Armor. I dressed. The silk felt cool against my skin. I looked in the mirror. The tired, disheveled housewife was gone. The woman staring back had cold eyes and a set jaw. Elena Vance was dead. The architect had taken her place. I walked out of the suite. The hallway was silent, lined with modern art. I followed the soft hum of electronics to a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. Julian was inside. The room was a command center that would make the Pentagon jealous. A wall of monitors displayed global news feeds, stock market tickers, and complex data streams. Julian was sitting in a leather chair, speaking quietly into a headset. When he saw me, he ended the call and stood up. "Leo is stable," he said. "The fever is breaking." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Julian said. He gestured to the main screen. "Look." On the center monitor, a live news feed from CNN was playing. The headline screamed in bold red letters, "Sterling Corp in free fall. CEO Carter, Sterling accused of gross negligence." The footage showed Carter yelling at a reporter outside the headquarters, looking disheveled and frantic. He shoved a camera away, his face twisted in rage. "The board of directors is calling for an emergency meeting at 8 in the morning." Julian said, "They are panicked. They want blood." I walked over to the console. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was a mechanical keyboard, the kind I preferred. The click of the keys would be the only music I needed. "They don't know the half of it yet," I said softly. The code you launched, Julian said, leaning against the desk, watching me with intensity. It stopped at the financial systems. Why? Because if I destroy him completely tonight, he might run, I said, my eyes fixed on Carter's face on the screen. I don't want him to run. I want him to stay and fight. I want him to think he has a chance. I typed a command. On the screen. A new window opened. It was a live feed from the security cameras inside the Sterling Corp boardroom. I could see the empty chairs, waiting for the vultures to arrive. I am going to attend that meeting, I said. Julian raised an eyebrow. You don't own any shares. Security will throw you out before you reach the lobby. I don't need shares, I said. I own the debt. I pulled up a file on the screen. It was a complex web of shell companies and loans, while Carter was busy buying yachts and furs for Sasha. He had leveraged his company's assets to secure high-risk loans that were quietly bought up by a holding company called Vance Ventures. I set this up 3 years ago, I explained. Every time he abused me, every time he ignored Leo, I bought a piece of his debt. Small amounts. Unnoticeable. Until today. Julian looked at the file, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just found the perfect partner for a crime. You own 60% of his operational debt. Julian calculated, if you call in the loans, he defaults. I finished the sentence. And I foreclose on the entire building. I turned to Julian. I need a lawyer, the most ruthless shark you have on your payroll. I have just the man, Julian said. He makes Carter's legal team look like kindergarten teachers. The screen beeped, a notification from the Chimera virus. Status Phase 1 complete, awaiting input. I typed a single word: pause. At Sterling Corp, the lights would flicker back on. The servers would reboot. Carter would think the storm had passed. He would think he had survived. He would go home, drink his whiskey, and tell Sasha that he fixed it. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to sleep soundly tonight, because tomorrow, he would wake up in a nightmare. The sun rose over Manhattan, cold and indifferent, reflecting off the glass facade of the Sterling Corp Tower, inside the boardroom on the 50th floor. The atmosphere was toxic. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table, their faces grim. They were sharks smelling blood in the water. Carter Sterling sat at the head of the table. He had barely slept. His eyes were red, but his suit was immaculate. He had spent the last 4 hours rehearsing his lies. It was a minor glitch, Carter said, his voice projecting a confidence he didn't feel. A legacy system error. My team has already patched it. The stock dip is a temporary overreaction. I am buying back shares as we speak to stabilize the price. A glitch. Old man Henderson, the majority shareholder, scoffed. He threw a stack of papers onto the table. You lost $40 million in 60 minutes. Carter, our clients are pulling out. The SEC is asking questions. This wasn't a glitch. It was a warning shot. And who fired it? Another board member asked, tapping his pen nervously. This Leo 01 signature. It sounds personal. Carter clenched his jaw. It is being investigated. We suspect corporate espionage from a rival firm, but rest assured, I am in full control. The double doors at the far end of the room swung open. They didn't just open, they were pushed with force. 2 security guards tried to block the entrance, but a man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped in, flashing a court order. It was Julian Thorne's lead attorney, Marcus Stone, known in the legal world as the Butcher, and behind him walked Elena. The room fell silent. Carter stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. What is the meaning of this? Carter demanded. Security, remove this woman. She is trespassing. Sit down, Carter, Elena said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that froze the guards in place. She walked to the other end of the table, directly opposite him. She wasn't wearing the rags she left in last night. She was wearing a tailored blazer that screamed power, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She has no right to be here. Sasha Reed burst into the room from the side door. Unable to stay away from the drama, she was wearing a dress that was too short for a business meeting. Get out. You leech. Are you here to beg for money again? Elena didn't even look at Sasha. She kept her eyes locked on Carter. I am not here to beg, Elena said, placing a single thin folder on the table. I am here to collect. Collect what? Henderson asked, looking at Elena with interest. Who are you? I am the owner of Vance Ventures, Elena announced. And, as of this morning, I am the holding creditor for 60% of Sterling Corp's operational debt. A collective gasp went through the room. The board members scrambled to check their tablets. That's impossible. Carter laughed, though the sound was shaky. Vance Ventures is a shell company. It's a ghost fund. A ghost fund that bought your toxic loans from the bank at 4 a.m. this morning. Marcus Stone spoke up. Sliding a legal document across the lengthy table, it stopped perfectly in front of Carter. Mr. Sterling, you leveraged this building and your personal equity to cover your losses in the Macau casino project last year. Those loans had a call immediately clause in case of a stock drop greater than 10%. Stone pointed to the screen where the stock ticker was still red. You dropped 15% last night. Stone said. We are calling the loan. Full repayment. Now. $120 million, Elena said calmly. Wire it by noon. Carter. Or I foreclose on this building, your assets, and your seat at this table. Carter picked up the document. His hands were shaking. He read the fine print. It was airtight. He looked at Elena. Really looked at her for the first time in years. He didn't see the woman who cooked his meals. He saw a predator. You, Carter whispered. You planned this. You set up the crash to trigger the clause. I am simply protecting my investment, Elena said, her voice dripping with ice. Something you failed to do when you fired your son. This is illegal, Sasha shrieked, grabbing Carter's arm. She stole this money. She's a thief. Elena finally turned her head. She looked at Sasha like one would look at a cockroach. Mr. Henderson, Elena addressed the board. Does Sterling Corp usually allow mistresses to disrupt board meetings? It seems unprofessional. It devalues the brand. Henderson, who had always hated Carter's reckless lifestyle, nodded to security. Escort Ms. Reed out and take her access badge. What? No, Carter, do something, Sasha screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. Carter didn't move. He couldn't. He was staring at the barrel of a gun named Insolvency. I don't have that kind of cash on hand. Carter gritted out through his teeth. You know that. I know, Elena said. She pulled out a chair and sat down. Which brings us to option B. The room was dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. I will convert the debt into equity, Elena proposed. I will take 51% of the voting shares, and my first motion as majority shareholder. She paused, letting the fear soak into Carter's bones. Is the immediate termination of the CEO for gross incompetence and breach of fiduciary duty. You can't do that. Carter slammed his hands on the table. I built this company. You inherited this company. Elena corrected him. And then you drove it into the ground while playing house with your secretary. The board has a choice. Bankrupt the company by noon, or let me inject capital and install new leadership. She looked around the table. Hands up for option B. One by one, the hands went up. Henderson was the first, then the others. Loyalty in business lasts only as long as the profit margin. Carter stood alone, betrayed by his greed, outmaneuvered by his useless wife. "Get out of my chair, Carter," Elena said softly. Carter looked around the room. He saw no allies, only contempt. He grabbed his phone and stormed toward the door. "This isn't over. Elena," he hissed as he passed her. "You think you can play in the big leagues? I will bury you." "You can try," Elena replied, not even turning around. "But remember, I know where the bodies are buried. I dug the graves." The door slammed shut behind him. Elena took a deep breath. She didn't smile. This wasn't happiness. This was surgery. She had cut out the tumor, but the patient, her son's future, was still in critical condition. She turned to Marcus Stone. "File the restraining order. If he comes within 500 feet of Leo, I want him in Rikers Island." Then, her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Phase 2, complete. But be careful. A wounded animal is dangerous. He just emptied his personal safe before leaving the building." Elena looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. She had won the battle, but the war had just turned violent. "Sanitize this room. I want every trace of his DNA removed from the furniture. Burn the chair if you have to." I gave the order to the cleaning crew, my voice echoing off the glass walls of the CEO's office. It felt less like a promotion and more like I was standing in the middle of a crime scene. I walked over to the desk. The heavy oak surface where Carter had signed away our future for 5 years. I picked up a framed photo of us from our wedding day. He was smiling. Not at me, but at the camera. I dropped it into the metal wastebasket. The glass cracked with a satisfying snap. My phone buzzed. It was Julian. "Get out of the building. Now." My security team found the safe in his private study open. The Glock 17 is missing, and so is the backup drive for the security cameras. A cold shiver ran down my spine, sharper than the blizzard outside. Carter had not just taken money, he had taken the ability to cover his tracks. He was going to do something that required no witnesses. I grabbed my bag and headed for the private elevator. The hallway was empty. The staff had fled the moment the board voted, terrified of the crossfire. I pressed the button for the underground parking garage. The numbers counted down. 50, 40, 10. The doors opened into the concrete cavern of the garage. It was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights humming with an annoying flicker. My footsteps echoed loudly as I walked toward the reserved spot where Julian's driver was supposed to be waiting. The spot was empty. Instead, a white van was parked there. The engine was idling. The windows were blacked out. On the side, a magnetic decal read St. Jude's Mental Health Transport. My stomach dropped. I turned to run back to the elevator, but the doors had already closed. "Elena." The voice came from behind a concrete pillar. Carter stepped out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up. He looked disheveled, manic, dangerous. In his hand, he held a piece of paper, not a gun. "You look tired, honey," Carter said, walking slowly toward me. "You are hallucinating. You think you own a company. You think you are a hacker. It is the stress. The grief of having a disabled child finally broke your mind." "Stay back," I warned, reaching into my purse for the pepper spray I always carried. "It is okay," Carter continued, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I signed the papers. An involuntary psychiatric hold. 72 hours. Just to get you stabilized." The side door of the van slid open. 2 men in white uniforms stepped out. They were not doctors. They were muscle. Their eyes were dead. The kind of men who hurt people for a paycheck. "She is a danger to herself and others," Carter told them, pointing at me. "She threatened to kill me upstairs. She is delusional. Take her gently." This was the asylum trap. The oldest trick in the book for rich men to silence their wives. If they dragged me into that van, I would be sedated, locked away, and declared mentally incompetent. Carter would regain control of the company as my legal guardian. I am the CEO of this company, I said, backing away, my hand gripping the canister. If you touch me, you are kidnapping a corporate executive. That is a federal crime. You are a housewife who forgot to take her lithium. Carter laughed. It was a terrifying sound. Grab her. The two men lunged. I didn't scream. Screaming is for victims. The architect does not scream. She calculates. I sidestepped the first man, spraying a stream of pepper gel directly into his eyes. He howled, clutching his face and falling to his knees. The second man was faster. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it painfully to make me drop the canister. I felt the bones grind together. Pain shot up my arm, white-hot and blinding. He shoved me against the cold concrete wall, pinning me there with his body weight. Hold still, bitch, he grunted, reaching for a syringe in his pocket. Carter watched, a smirk playing on his lips. Don't worry, Elena, the sedative acts fast. When you wake up, we will renegotiate that debt. The needle moved closer to my neck. Suddenly, a deafening roar filled the garage. High beams blinded us. A black SUV smashed into the side of the white van, sending it skidding across the concrete with the screech of tearing metal. The man pinning me flinched, distracted. That was all I needed. I slammed my knee into his groin with every ounce of strength I had. He groaned and doubled over. I shoved him away and scrambled toward the elevator. The door of the SUV flew open. Julian Thorne stepped out. He wasn't holding an umbrella this time. He was holding a tire iron. He didn't say a word. He walked up to the man who had held me and swung the iron bar. It connected with the man's knee. The sound of bone cracking was sickeningly loud. The man collapsed, screaming in agony. Carter's face went pale. He stumbled back, realizing his muscle was gone. Thorne, Carter stammered. This is a private family matter. She is sick. Julian dropped the tire iron. It clattered on the floor. He walked up to Carter, towering over him. Julian didn't hit him. He adjusted Carter's collar, tightening it until Carter gasped for air. The only sickness here is you, Julian said, his voice a low rumble. If I see these men again, they won't be walking out. And if you ever try to touch her again, I won't use a tire iron. I will use my bare hands. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police sirens this time. Julian's security team must have called them. Carter shoved Julian's hand away, regaining a shred of his arrogance. He backed toward the exit, looking at me with eyes full of venom. You think you won? Carter spat. Go ahead. Call the cops. But while you are playing hero here, who is watching the penthouse? My blood froze. What did you do? I whispered. I called Child Protective Services an hour ago. Carter smiled, checking his watch. I reported in kidnapping. I told them a mentally unstable woman abducted a special needs child and left him with a strange man. They should be arriving at Julian's apartment right about now to take Leo into emergency state custody. No, I gasped, taking a step forward. The foster system is rough, Elena, Carter said, his voice echoing as he backed into the shadows of the emergency exit. Especially for a mute kid. Better hurry. He turned and ran just as the police cruisers burst into the garage. I didn't wait to give a statement. I didn't wait for Julian. I sprinted toward Julian's SUV. Drive! I screamed at the driver. Get me to the penthouse now. Julian jumped in beside me as the car screeched out of the garage. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I dialed the nanny cam I had secretly installed in the guest room. The screen loaded. My heart stopped. The room was empty. The bed was unmade. Leo was gone. The speedometer on the digital dashboard of Julian's SUV read 100 miles per hour. The city outside was a blur of gray slush and neon lights. But I saw none of it. My entire world had narrowed down to the black screen of my phone, displaying the empty bedroom where my son was supposed to be sleeping. "Faster," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Please." "We are 3 minutes away," Julian said from the seat beside me. He was not looking at me. He was on the phone, barking orders to his security detail at the penthouse. "Do not let CPS breach the door. Stall them. Demand a warrant. If they try to force entry, you block them physically. I don't care if you get arrested. Hold the line." I gripped the door handle until my knuckles turned white. Carter's words echoed in my mind like a curse. The foster system is rough. He knew exactly where to strike. He couldn't beat me in the boardroom. So he decided to rip my heart out. He knew Leo wouldn't survive a night in a state facility. The noise, the strangers, the lack of his specific routine, it would send him into a seizure that could kill him. "This is my fault," I said, the guilt tasting like bile in my throat. "I left him alone. I was so focused on destroying Carter that I forgot to protect Leo." "You were securing his future," Julian corrected me, his voice sharp. "Stop it. Panic is useless. We need the architect right now, not the victim." He was right. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to slow. I visualized the layout of Julian's penthouse. 2 exits, 1 main elevator, 1 service elevator. The windows were reinforced glass. If CPS was there, they would be at the front door. The car screeched to a halt in front of the building. I didn't wait for the driver to open the door. I scrambled out, nearly slipping on the icy pavement. There were 2 police cruisers parked near the entrance, their lights flashing silently against the falling snow. I ran past the doorman, ignoring his startled greeting. Julian was right behind me, his long strides eating up the distance. We hit the elevator button. The numbers climbed agonizingly slowly. When the doors opened onto the penthouse floor, chaos greeted us. 3 police officers and a woman in a beige trench coat, the unmistakable uniform of a bureaucrat, were standing in the hallway. They were arguing with Julian's head of security, a massive man named Graves, who was blocking the double doors with his body. "Mrs. Sterling," the woman called out as soon as she saw me. She flashed a badge. "I am Agent Miller from Child Protective Services. We received a credible report of child endangerment and kidnapping. We have an emergency court order to remove the minor, Leo Sterling, from these premises." "You are not taking my son," I said, walking straight up to her. I was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. The report was filed by Carter Sterling, a man who just attempted to abduct me less than 20 minutes ago. "The police are looking for him right now." "That is a separate matter," Agent Miller said, her face impassive. "My priority is the safety of the child. We have reason to believe the child is being held here against the father's will and is in need of immediate medical attention that is being denied. He is under the care of private specialists inside this apartment." Julian stepped in, his presence looming over the small hallway. "And you are trespassing on private property without a search warrant signed by a judge. The exigent circumstances clause allows us entry," the officer next to her said, his hand resting on his belt. "Now step aside, or you will be charged with obstruction." "Let them in," I said. Julian looked at me, surprised. "Let them in," I repeated. "If we hide, we look guilty. Let them see that Leo is safe, warm, and cared for. Then they can leave." Graves stepped aside. I pushed open the double doors and marched straight to the guest suite. "Leo," I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. "Leo, honey, Mommy is home." I pushed open the door to his room. It was empty. The bed sheets were thrown back. The IV stand was there, the tube dangling uselessly. dripping clear fluid onto the carpet. The needle had been ripped out. Agent Miller pushed past me, scanning the room. "Where is the child, Ms. Vance?" He was here," I stammered. Checking the bathroom. Empty. I checked the closet. Empty. The nanny cam. I saw the bed was empty. But I thought, "So, you admit you don't know where your son is?" Agent Miller scribbled something on her clipboard. "This confirms the report of negligence. Officers, search the premises." "No." I spun around, grabbing Julian's arm. "Carter's men. Did they get in? Did they take him?" Julian looked at Graves. "Check the logs. Did anyone enter or exit this floor in the last hour?" "No one, sir," Graves said, his face pale. "The elevators have been locked down since you called. The stairwells are alarmed. Nobody came in. Nobody went out. Then he is still here." I whispered. My mind started racing, processing the data. Leo was a genius. He was 5. But he thought like an engineer. If he woke up alone, or if he saw something that scared him, he wouldn't just run. He would hide. He would find a fortress. "Leo!" I yelled, running into the living room. "Leo! Come out!" The police officers were overturning cushions, looking behind curtains. They were making noise, creating chaos. "Stop!" I screamed at them. "You are scaring him. Everyone stop moving." The room fell silent. I closed my eyes. I tried to think like Leo. Where would I go if I wanted to be invisible? Where would I go if I wanted to control the environment? The command center. I opened my eyes and looked at the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall. Julian's server room, the room with the walls of screens, the room with the mechanical keyboards. I ran to the doors. They were locked. "Julian, the key," I demanded. "It is biometric," Julian said, pressing his thumb against the scanner. The light flashed red. "Access denied." "That's impossible." Julian frowned. "It is my system." He tried again. "Access denied." A faint sound came from the other side of the door. It was a rhythmic clicking. Click-clack. Click-clack. The sound of a mechanical keyboard being typed on at lightning speed. He locked us out. I realized. A wave of relief washing over me so strong my knees almost buckled. He hacked the lock. "Open this door immediately!" Agent Miller shouted, banging on the wood. "Or we will break it down. If you touch that door, I will sue you for everything you own." I hissed at her. "He is terrified. If you break in, you will traumatize him." I pressed my face against the wood. "Leo," I spoke softly. "It is Mama. I am safe. The bad man is not here. Open the door. Baby. Please." The typing stopped. Silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, the heavy electronic lock beeped. The light turned green. The door creaked open. The room inside was dark, illuminated only by the glow of 20 monitors. Leo was sitting in Julian's massive leather chair, which swallowed his small frame. He was wearing oversized headphones. His small fingers were resting on the keyboard, on the main screen. The security feed from the hallway was playing. He had been watching us. He had seen the police. He had seen the stranger in the trench coat. He had identified them as threats and retreated to the safest room in the house, then locked the gate. I rushed in and fell to my knees, wrapping my arms around him. He was trembling slightly. I checked his arm. A small drop of blood where he had pulled the IV out. "I've got you," I whispered, burying my face in his hair. "I've got you." "Ms. Vance." Agent Miller stepped into the room, ruining the moment. "We need to take custody of the child now. The environment is clearly unstable. He has access to high-voltage electronics and he has access to safety." Julian interrupted. his voice dropping to a dangerous octave. He walked over to the desk and picked up a piece of paper that had just printed from the laser printer in the corner. Julian read it, a smirk appearing on his face. Actually, Agent Miller, you might want to read this before you attempt to kidnap my client's son. He handed the paper to the CPS agent. What is this? She asked, adjusting her glasses. That, Julian said, is a temporary emergency custody order granted by Judge Hamilton. It was filed electronically 5 minutes ago by my legal team. It grants full physical custody to Elena Vance due to the imminent threat posed by the father, Carter Sterling, who is currently a fugitive wanted for attempted kidnapping and assault. I looked at Julian. He hadn't just been barking at security on the ride over. He had woken up a judge. Agent Miller read the document. Her face soured. She knew she was beaten. The signature on the bottom was valid. This is temporary, she warned, handing the paper back. There will be a hearing in 48 hours. If this child is found to be in danger, the only danger to this child is the bureaucracy, I said, standing up and holding Leo's hand. Now get out of my house. Agent Miller signaled the officers. They turned and left. The heavy front door clicked shut behind them. I exhaled, sinking back into the leather chair with Leo on my lap. The adrenaline crash hit me hard. My hands started to shake again. He hacked the door lock, Julian said, looking at the console. He rewrote the biometric protocol in under 3 minutes. Elena, your son isn't just smart. He is a prodigy. I looked down at Leo. He was looking at the screen again. He pointed a small finger at one of the monitors. I followed his gaze. It wasn't the security feed anymore. It was a news channel. Breaking news. Carter Sterling found unconscious in Central Park. Police say he was mugged and beaten by unknown assailants. He is currently in critical condition at Mount Sinai Hospital. Mugged, I whispered. He ran from the garage 20 minutes ago. Julian walked over to the window, looking out at the snow-covered city. He adjusted his cufflinks. New York is a dangerous city, Julian said, his tone completely neutral. Especially for men who run around with cash in their pockets and no security detail. Karma has a way of catching up fast. I looked at Julian's back. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this wasn't random. Julian hadn't just called the judge. He had made another call. A call to the shadows. Carter had tried to take my son. Julian had made sure Carter wouldn't be walking for a very long time. I should have felt horrified. I should have felt guilty. But as I hugged my son tighter, feeling his small heart beat against mine, I felt only a cold, dark satisfaction. Good, I said. Leo looked up at me. He didn't smile. He just tapped his finger on the desk 3 times. A. F. E. The intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator breathing for the man who used to rule my life. I stood in the doorway, watching through the glass. Carter Sterling lay in the bed, his face a landscape of purple bruises and swollen tissue. His left leg was elevated in a cast. His arm was tethered to 3 different machines. He looked small, broken. Inside the room, a woman was weeping. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Sasha Reed was clutching Carter's limp hand, her mascara running down her cheeks in perfect streaks. But then I saw her eyes shift. She wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at the iPad resting on the bedsheet. She lifted Carter's unconscious hand. She was trying to press his thumb against the biometric scanner of the banking app on the screen. Access denied, the robotic voice of the tablet stated. Sasha cursed under her breath, her grief vanishing instantly. She tried again, pressing harder, digging his thumb into the glass. You need a living pulse for that to work. Sasha, I said, pushing the door open. And considering his heart rate, I doubt the sensor can register him as a conscious authorized user. Sasha jumped, dropping Carter's hand. It flopped onto the mattress like a dead fish. She spun around, her eyes wide with panic that quickly hardened into hatred. You, she hissed. You did this to him. You hired those thugs to beat him half to death. I was at the police station filing a restraining order when this happened, I said calmly. Stepping into the room, two of Julian's private security guards stepped in behind me, filling the small space with their imposing presence. According to the police report, Carter was the victim of a random mugging in Central Park. A tragedy. New York really has gone downhill. Liar, Sasha spat. He was running from you. He was trying to save his son. He was trying to kidnap a child to use as leverage. I corrected her. And now, look at him, incapacitated, unable to make decisions. I walked to the foot of the bed and picked up the medical chart. Severe concussion, 2 fractured ribs, a shattered kneecap. It looks painful. I closed the chart. As his legal wife, since the divorce papers were never filed with the court clerk, I am technically his next of kin. Sasha's face went pale. No, she stammered. He signed the papers. You signed them. He threw them on the floor. I reminded her. He never processed them, which means I am the one who makes his medical decisions. I could order the doctors to pull the plug right now. Sasha gasped, backing away until she hit the window ledge. But I won't, I said, looking at Carter's swollen eyes. Death is too easy. I want him to wake up. I want him to see what he lost. I turned to the guards. Ms. Reed is not a family member. She has no legal standing to be here. Please escort her out, and make sure she doesn't take the iPad. You can't do this, Sasha screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. I am pregnant with his child. I have rights. We already debunked the pregnancy myth. Sasha, I said coldly, get out. She screamed obscenities as they dragged her down the hallway. I waited until her voice faded before I turned back to Carter. I leaned down close to his ear. The doctors say hearing is the last sense to go, even in a coma. Can you hear me, Carter? I whispered. I know you can. Listen closely. I am going to take everything. The company, the house, the reputation. And I am going to use your own money to build a life for the son you threw away. On the monitor, his heart rate spiked. Beep, beep, beep. Rest up. I patted his shoulder. The court hearing is in 2 days. Don't be late. Back at the penthouse. The atmosphere was different. It wasn't sterile like the hospital. It was electric. Julian was in the command center, reviewing legal documents with Marcus Stone. When I walked in, Julian looked up. He didn't ask how it went. He knew. Did he wake up? Julian asked. No, I said, taking off my coat. But he knows I was there. Good, Julian said. He gestured to the main workstation. Your son has been busy. I looked over at the desk. Leo was sitting there, typing furiously. He had 3 empty juice boxes lined up next to him. He looked tired, but his eyes were shining with an intensity I had never seen before. What is he doing? I asked, walking over to him. He is following the money, Julian explained. When Carter emptied his safe, he didn't just take cash. He took a ledger, a digital key. Leo hit the enter key with a flourish. A map of the world appeared on the main screen. Lines of light connected New York to the Cayman Islands, then to Zurich, and finally to a server in Panama. Offshore accounts, I realized. He was skimming from the company. Not just skimming, Julian corrected. Laundering. Look at the deposits. They don't match the company revenue. These are massive cash injections from shell companies linked to illegal gambling rings in Macau. My blood ran cold. Carter wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a criminal. He was washing dirty money for someone else. If this gets out, The government will freeze all assets. I said. Sterling Corp will be seized. The stock will go to zero. I will be the owner of a worthless carcass. Exactly, Julian said. That is why we need to move the funds before the feds get involved. We need to secure the capital in an escrow account, legally protected, before the indictment drops. Can we do that? I asked. Leo tapped the screen. A password prompt appeared. It was a complex alphanumeric encryption. Enter passkey. We don't have the key, I said. It was in the safe. Leo looked at me. He rolled his eyes. A very 5-year-old gesture. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, the drawing he had made last week. The one Carter had called trash. He unfolded it. It wasn't a drawing of a house or a dog. It was a series of numbers and shapes. He memorized it. I whispered. He saw Carter type it in once, and he encoded it into a drawing. Leo typed the sequence into the keyboard. Access granted. The screen filled with numbers. A balance of $50 million. Transfer it, Julian ordered, to the Vance Ventures Secure Trust. Now. Leo's fingers flew. Across town, in a cheap motel room. Sasha Reed was frantically pacing. She had been barred from the penthouse, barred from the hospital, and her credit cards had been declined at the coffee shop. She pulled out a burner phone Carter had given her for emergencies. She dialed a number stored simply as the Viper. He is down, Sasha said into the phone, her voice trembling. Carter is in a coma, and his ex-wife. She knows about the accounts. I saw her son hacking the system. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a voice that sounded like grinding gravel spoke. That money does not belong to Carter Sterling, and it certainly does not belong to his ex-wife. She is stealing it right now. Sasha cried. You have to stop her, if she takes it. I can't pay you what Carter owed. You are useless to me, Sasha. The voice said. But if she touches that money, she declares war on people far more dangerous than a corporate lawyer. The line went dead. Back in the command center, the progress bar hit 100%. Transfer complete. We did it, I breathed out. The capital is safe. Leo slumped back in the chair, exhausted. I picked him up and kissed his forehead. You saved us, baby, I whispered. Julian's phone rang. He answered it, his face darkening instantly. Understood, Julian said. He hung up and looked at me. What is it? I asked, sensing the shift in the air. That was my contact at the bank, Julian said. The transfer went through, but it triggered a silent alarm. From the FBI, I asked. No, Julian said, walking over to the window and closing the heavy blinds. From a private server in Russia. The owners of that money just realized it is gone, and they have the GPS coordinates of the IP address that initiated the transfer. He looked at Leo, then at me. They know we are here. Code Black, I repeat. Code Black. Seal the perimeter. Julian's voice was not a shout, but a cold command that cut through the silence of the command center. He hit a large red button on the console. Instantly, the view of the snow-covered city disappeared. Heavy steel shutters descended over the floor-to-ceiling windows with the grinding sound of industrial machinery. The reinforced glass was now backed by 2 inches of ballistic plating. The ambient lighting shifted to a low, emergency red. What is happening? I stood up, instinctively moving between the window and Leo, who was still slumped in the chair, too tired to understand the sudden darkness. We triggered a tripwire, Julian said, pulling a Glock 19 from a drawer under the desk. He checked the magazine with a fluid, practiced motion. The money we just moved didn't belong to Carter. He was just the custodian. Whose is it? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Vadim Volkov, Julian said, sliding the gun into his waistband. In the underworld, they call him the Viper. He runs the largest money laundering operation on the East Coast. Carter was washing gambling profits for the Russian Bratva. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at the screen. At the $50 million sitting in the trust account. That wasn't just capital. That was blood money. And I had just stolen it. They know we have it, I whispered. They tracked the IP. Julian nodded. And they know exactly where we are. A low humming sound started to vibrate through the walls. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees. Drones. Graves, the head of security, shouted from the hallway. Thermal imaging. They are scanning the building structure. I ran to the wall of monitors. The external cameras showed 4 black quadcopters hovering outside the steel shutters, their red sensor lights blinking in the snowstorm. They weren't attacking. They were watching. Waiting. They want the money back, I said, my mind racing. If we give it back, they will kill us anyway. Julian cut me off. Volkov doesn't leave loose ends, especially not loose ends that know his account numbers. And he looked at Leo. He will want the boy. Voila, I pulled Leo into my arms. Because Leo is the only one who memorized the encryption key. Julian said grimly, Carter is in a coma. Leo is the only living key to their entire network, if they get him. They own the network again. My fear vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They weren't just coming for money, they were coming for my son. Then they die, I said. The secure landline on Julian's desk rang. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the red-lit room. This line was supposed to be encrypted. Impossible to call from the outside unless you had the direct frequency. Julian stared at the phone. Pick it up, he told me. He wants to negotiate. I walked to the desk. My hand hovered over the receiver. I took a deep breath, burying Elena, the housewife, deep inside, and letting the architect take control. I picked up the phone. This is Vance. Ms. Vance. A voice spoke. It was smooth, accented, and sounded like silk wrapped around a razor blade. Or should I call you Mrs. Sterling? I hear you are going through a messy divorce. Mr. Volkov, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I assume you are calling about the unauthorized withdrawal from your accounts. Withdrawal. Volkov laughed softly. I like that word. It sounds so banking. But in my world, we call it theft. You have something that belongs to me, and you have the boy who knows the secrets. I have leverage, I corrected him. $50 million of leverage, and the encryption key, I just rewrote it. Leo doesn't know it anymore. Only I do. It was a lie, a dangerous bluff, but I had to take the target off Leo's back. Is that so? Volkov's voice dropped an octave. You are playing a dangerous game for a woman who used to bake cookies for the PTA. And you are playing a dangerous game for a criminal operating on American soil. I shot back. Here's the deal. You call off your dogs. You let the custody hearing happen tomorrow without interference. And I won't email your entire ledger to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. You think you can threaten me? Volkov asked, amused. I am holding a match over your money, Vadim, I said, using his first name to show disrespect. If you come through that door, I burn it all, every cent, every account number. You will be broke and exposed before your foot hits the carpet. You have spirit, Volkov said. I like that. Carter was a coward. You might be worth doing business with. I don't do business with criminals, I said. I destroy them. We shall see, Volkov said. You have until dawn to return the funds. If not, well, the penthouse is high up. But gravity works everywhere. The line clicked dead. He bought it, Julian said, stepping closer. He thinks you are the key now. Good, I said, my hands shaking only after I hung up. That buys us time. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. The hum of the servers died. The monitors went black. The red emergency lights sputtered and died. Total darkness engulfed the penthouse. "He cut the power," Graves shouted. "Hard line cut in the basement." "Backup generators," Julian barked. "They aren't kicking in," Graves yelled back. Someone jammed the transfer switch remotely. We were blind. The electronic locks on the doors disengaged with a hollow clunk. The high-tech fortress had just been turned into a metal cage. "Leo," I whispered, reaching out in the dark. "Mama." His small voice came from the floor. He was tapping my leg. Tap, 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 tap. D-O-O-R. "Get down!" Julian screamed, tackling me and Leo to the ground just as the front doors of the penthouse exploded inward. It wasn't a bomb. It was a battering ram. Glass shattered. Flashlights cut through the smoke. The heavy boots of men rushed into the hallway. They weren't waiting for dawn. The negotiation was a distraction. "Secure the target," a voice shouted in Russian. Julian rolled over, firing 3 shots blindly into the hallway. The muzzle flashes illuminated the room in strobe light bursts. "Run to the panic room," Julian yelled at me. "Take Leo, go." "I am not leaving you," I screamed, grabbing Leo. "Go," Julian roared, standing up to draw their fire. I scrambled on my hands and knees, dragging Leo toward the hidden panel behind the bookshelf. Bullets tore through the drywall above our heads. I pushed the book that triggered the mechanism. The wall slid open. I threw Leo inside and dove in after him. Through the narrowing crack of the closing door. The last thing I saw was Julian standing alone in the middle of the room, reloading his weapon as 5 shadowed figures charged him. The wall sealed shut with a heavy mechanical thud. Silence. We were safe, but we were trapped. And Julian was on the other side with the wolves. The heavy steel door of the panic room sealed us in, cutting off the deafening roar of gunfire instantly. Inside, the silence was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air out of my lungs. The room was small, concrete, lined with shelves of emergency rations and water. A single blue LED strip on the ceiling provided the only light. I fell back against the cold wall, clutching Leo to my chest. He was trembling, not crying, just vibrating with terror. "It's okay," I lied, stroking his hair. "We are safe here. Uncle Julian is going to be fine." But I knew the truth. Julian was one man with a handgun against a kill squad armed with assault rifles. The math didn't add up. Leo pulled away from me. He crawled to the corner where a small, ruggedized terminal was bolted to the floor. It was a backup system, completely isolated from the main network. He pointed at the screen. It was black. "It's offline, baby," I whispered. "The power is cut." Leo shook his head. He reached under the desk and pulled a hidden lever. A faint hum started. A UPS uninterruptible power supply. The screen flickered to life. It didn't have internet access, but it was hardwired to the building's internal systems. Leo typed a command. A grainy, black-and-white video feed appeared on the monitor. It was a hidden camera in the living room. I gasped, covering my mouth to stifle a scream. The room was a war zone. Furniture was overturned. The expensive art on the walls was riddled with bullet holes. Julian was crouching behind the overturned mahogany desk. He was bleeding. A dark stain was spreading on the shoulder of his white shirt. He was reloading his weapon with practiced calm, but his movements were slowing down. 3 mercenaries were advancing on him, moving in a tactical wedge formation. They wore balaclavas and tactical vests. They weren't rushing. They knew he was trapped. "Surrender, Mr. Thorne," one of them shouted, his voice distorted by a mask. "Give us the woman, and you live." Julian didn't answer. He fired 2 shots. One mercenary grunted and stumbled back, the bullet hitting his vest. The others returned fire, suppressing Julian behind the desk. Wood splinters exploded into the air. "He can't hold them," I whispered. "They are going to flank him." Leo watched the screen. His eyes were wide, scanning the room not as a battlefield, but as a grid of connected devices. He looked at me, then tapped the keyboard. A schematic of the penthouse appeared. Red dots indicated the attackers. Blue dot was Julian. Leo pointed to the ceiling on the schematic, specifically, to the fire suppression system. "The sprinklers," I asked. "Water won't stop them, Leo." Leo shook his head aggressively. He typed a command: "Override safety protocols. Discharge. Agent Halon." Halon gas. It wasn't water. It was a chemical fire suppressant used in server rooms to extinguish fires without damaging electronics. It worked by sucking the oxygen out of the air. "Leo." "No." I grabbed his hand. "If you trigger that, you will suffocate Julian too." Leo pulled his hand away. He pointed to the screen again. Julian was near the broken window. The shutters were down, but there was a gap at the bottom where the blast had warped the metal. Fresh air was leaking in there. The mercenaries were in the center of the room, far from ventilation. It was a gamble, a desperate, terrifying gamble. "Do it," I whispered. Leo hit enter. On the video feed, a hiss erupted from the ceiling nozzles. A thick, white fog descended instantly, filling the room like a tangible ghost. The mercenaries looked up, confused. Then, they started coughing. The gas was heavy, displacing the oxygen in seconds. One of them dropped his rifle, clutching his throat. Another tried to run for the door, but he stumbled and fell, his legs giving out as hypoxia set in. Julian, realizing what was happening, dropped to the floor. He crawled toward the window gap, pressing his face against the cold concrete where the draft was coming in. The room turned into a silent graveyard. The mercenaries were writhing on the floor, gasping for air that wasn't there. "Ventilation," I ordered Leo. "Clear the room now." Leo typed, "Activate exhaust fans, max power." The roar of industrial fans vibrated through the floor. The white fog began to swirl and vanish, sucked out through the vents. I watched the screen. The three mercenaries were unconscious. Julian was still moving. He pushed himself up, coughing violently, dragging air into his starved lungs. He looked at the camera lens, hidden in the bookshelf. He knew. He gave a weak thumbs up. I collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief. But the nightmare wasn't over. The terminal beeped. A new alert. "Perimeter breach, Sector 4. Sector 4 was the panic room door itself. Someone was outside, not the mercenaries. Someone else. A heavy mechanical drill started to grind against the steel door. The screech of metal on metal was ear-splitting. They brought a thermal lance. I realized. They are cutting us out. I pulled Leo away from the terminal. We huddled in the farthest corner. I looked around for a weapon, a flare gun, a heavy flashlight, anything. The door glowed orange in the center. Sparks flew. The metal began to melt, dripping like wax. "Stay behind me," I told Leo. The lock mechanism gave way with a molten clunk. The heavy door was kicked open. Smoke poured in. I raised the heavy flashlight, ready to strike. A figure stepped through the smoke. He was huge. He wore a black tactical suit, but no mask. His face was scarred, terrifying. It wasn't a Russian mercenary. It was Graves, Julian's head of security. "Ms. Vance," Graves rumbled, his voice rough. "Path is clear. We need to move. The police are 2 minutes out, but Volkov has a second team coming up the stairs." "Julian?" I asked, pushing past him. "Mr. Thorne is secure," Graves said. "He is hurt, but alive. He is waiting in the service elevator." I grabbed Leo and ran. We sprinted through the ruined living room. The bodies of the mercenaries lay still on the floor, their chests barely moving. I didn't look at them. Julian was leaning against the wall of the service elevator, clutching his bleeding shoulder. His face was gray, but his eyes were sharp. "You tried to suffocate me," he rasped, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I tried to save you," I said, checking his wound. It was a through and through. And it worked. The architect strikes again. Julian winced as the elevator started to descend. "Where are we going?" I asked. "The police?" "The police can't protect us from Volkov." Julian said, "He has men inside the precinct. If we go into custody, we die in a holding cell before morning." "Then where?" The elevator doors opened into the basement garage. A nondescript gray sedan was waiting. "We are going dark," Julian said, stumbling toward the car. "To a place where technology can't track us. A place where Volkov has no power." "Does such a place exist?" I asked, buckling Leo into the back seat. Julian looked at me, his eyes hard. "We are going to make it exist." As the car sped out of the garage, leaving the wailing sirens behind, I looked back at the burning skyline of New York, the city I wanted to conquer, the city that just tried to eat me alive. We were fugitives now, but we had the money, we had the code, and we had each other. The war had just begun. The bunker smelled of ozone and stale coffee. For 3 days, I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, glued to the glowing green text cascading down the monitors. "Target confirmed," I whispered, my voice raspy. "Came in account 44B, liquidated." Leo, sitting on a crate next to me, tapped his screen. Another red light turned green. "Panama Shell Corporation, exposed. IRS notification sent." We weren't just stealing money anymore. We were burning down the house. Julian groaned on the cot behind us. I spun around. He was trying to sit up, his face pale but his eyes clear. The fever had broken. "Elena," he croaked. "How long?" 3 days, I said, handing him a canteen of water. "Drink." He took a sip, then looked at the wall of monitors. His eyes widened. He saw the scrolling data, the bank logos, the police databases, the list of exposed judges. "Elena," Julian whispered, a mixture of awe and terror in his voice. "What did you do?" "I executed Protocol Omega," I said flatly. "I didn't just target Volkov. I targeted everyone who ever took a dime from him. The police captain who signed the warrant, his offshore account is now 0, and his email history is on the front page of the New York Times. The judge who tried to take Leo his darkest secrets are currently trending on Twitter. You declared war on the system." Julian tried to stand, wincing as his shoulder protested. "Do you realize what happens when you corner a rat like Volkov? He doesn't surrender. He bites." "Let him bite," I said, turning back to the screen. "I just took his teeth." A siren wailed from the computer, a high-pitched, digital scream. "Intrusion detected. Perimeter breach." "They found us." Leo signed frantically. "How?" Julian demanded, grabbing his gun from the table. "This bunker is a Faraday cage. No signal gets out." "I let it out," I admitted. "I had to open a port to upload the data. They backtraced it." "You used yourself as bait," Julian realized. It was the only way to end this. I stood up. "He is coming. Volkov himself. He won't trust a hitman with this. He needs to kill me personally to stop the leak." Boom! The heavy steel door of the bunker shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They are using C4, Julian said, checking his weapon. "1 mag left. Elena, get behind the table." "No," I said. I walked to the center of the room. I wasn't holding a gun. I was holding a small remote detonator. "Elena, what is that?" Julian froze. "The bunker isn't just a shelter. Julian, I said calmly. It was an old missile silo control point. The foundation is rigged with self-destruct charges to prevent capture. The door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, a figure stepped in. Vadim Volkov. He looked impeccable, wearing a long wool coat, flanked by 4 heavily armed men. He stepped over the debris, smiling. "Ms. Vance," Volkov said, spreading his arms. "Or should I say, the architect. You have caused me a great deal of inconvenience." "I cost you $3 billion, I said. "Money is renewable." Volkov shrugged. "Reputation is not. You made me look weak." He raised a gold-plated pistol. "Goodbye, Elena." "Wait," I said. "Look at your phone." Volkov frowned. He didn't lower the gun. "Why?" "Because your remaining accounts just emptied," I said. "But the money didn't go to me. It went to the FBI, along with your GPS coordinates." Volkov's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His face turned purple. "You bitch!" he snarled. He raised the gun to fire. I pressed the button on the remote. Click! Nothing happened. No explosion. No earth-shattering kaboom. Volkov laughed. "A dud, how poetic." "No," I smiled. "Not a bomb. A signal." A deafening roar filled the air outside. Not an explosion. Rotors. "FBI, drop your weapons." The voice was amplified by a megaphone. Red laser dots danced across Volkov's chest. "You see, Vadim," I said, stepping closer to him as his men lowered their rifles in confusion. "I didn't just leak your data to the public. I leaked it to the one person who hates you more than I do. Agent Miller from the FBI. I gave her everything, on a silver platter, in exchange for full immunity." Volkov looked around. He was trapped. The hunter was now the prey. "You won't live to enjoy it," Volkov hissed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Bang! The shot was deafening in the small space. Volkov dropped his gun. He looked down at his chest. A red flower was blooming on his white shirt. Behind him, Julian stood with his smoking Glock. One shot, center mass. "That was for my shoulder," Julian said. The FBI agents swarmed the room. 1 month later, the terrace of the villa overlooked the azure waters of the Amalfi Coast. The sun was warm, smelling of lemons and sea salt. I sat at the outdoor table, sipping an espresso. My phone lay on the table. No more burner phones. A brand new, encrypted iPhone. Leo was running on the grass, chasing a golden retriever. He was laughing. A real, loud, joyous laugh. He wasn't mute anymore. He spoke when he wanted to, and when he didn't, he coded. Julian walked out onto the terrace. His arm was out of the sling, though he still moved stiffly. He placed a newspaper on the table. Sterling Corp dissolved. Former CEO Carter Sterling sentenced to 25 years for money laundering. 25 years, Julian said, sitting down. He will be an old man when he gets out. If he survives, I said, not looking at the paper. Prison is rough for men who used to be soft. And us? Julian asked. Are we retired? I looked at Leo. Then I looked at the laptop sitting closed on the table. The architect is retired, I said. Elena Vance is just a mother enjoying a vacation. Julian smiled. He reached across the table and took my hand. But, I added, I did keep a back door into the global banking system, just in case. Julian laughed. Just in case. I looked out at the ocean. The nightmare was over. But I knew, deep down, that peace was just a pause between wars. And if the war ever came back, I would be ready.